News.
In Donald Trump's hush money trial in New York. Israel says it has taken the Gaza side of the Rafah crossing as truce talks continue in Egypt. China's President Xi Jinping is in Serbia for the second leg of his European tour, commemorating the 25th anniversary of the NATO bombing of the Chinese embassy, as well as a multi-billion-dollar investment in the country. And in about half an hour's time on Business Today, we'll look at TikTok's swiping back at a US law that would effectively ban the video app in the country. His trial over an alleged hush money payment to the adult film star Stormy Daniels. Ms. Daniels, who was giving evidence in person, went into explicit detail about her alleged sexual encounter with Mr. Trump. So much so that his defense called for a mistrial. That was rejected by the judge. Mr. Trump is facing charges of fraud for recording the payment to Ms. Daniels as legal expenses. Our North America editor, Sarah Smith, has more.
Each day, Donald Trump waves to the cameras before heading to court. But this was no ordinary day in this extraordinary trial.
Mr. Trump, is this true?
Can you see this for me?
Today in court, he had to watch a woman who claims she had sex with him openly testify about it. Stormy Daniels was paid $130,000 by Mr. Trump to stop her going public with claims of a sexual encounter shortly before the 2016 presidential election. Just outside the courtroom, he insisted he shouldn't be on trial at all.
And the trial is a very unfair trial. It's a very, very unfair trial. The good news is they have nothing. Thank you.
The court was shown this photograph of Mr. Trump with Stormy Daniels as she described first meeting him at a golf tournament in 2006, the day she says they later had sex. It was at this golf course, she says, that Donald Trump sent his bodyguard to invite her to dinner. When she got to his hotel suite, she laughed at him for wearing black silk pyjamas, while he dangled the possibility of her appearing on his TV show, The Apprentice. When she asked about his wife Melania, he told her they slept in separate rooms. As Miss Daniels described having sex on the bed with Mr. Trump without using any protection, she was frequently interrupted by objections from his lawyers. Her testimony was so prejudicial, they argued, the judge should declare a mistrial. He agreed there were some things that would probably have been better left unsaid, but the case goes on. Ms. Daniels was asked if she hates Donald Trump when his lawyers cross-examined her. Yes, she said, as it all got very heated. He had to listen to her admit she had publicly called him an orange turd and that she'd like to see him jail as she wants him held accountable. Before his lawyer directly accused Stormy Daniels of trying to extort the former president through the hush money deal. Earlier today, Mr. Trump posted on social media, "I've just recently been told who the witness is today. This is unprecedented. No time for lawyers to prepare. No judge has ever run a trial in such a biased and partisan way." He then quickly deleted it. He's already been warned by the judge. He could be jailed if he continues to post about witnesses in this trial. Sarah Smith, BBC News, New York.
In another case facing the former president, a Florida judge has indefinitely postponed Mr. Trump's criminal trial over his alleged mishandling of classified documents. The former president had been scheduled to go on trial on the 20th of May, but the district judge said that was not possible because of the number of pre-trial motions before the court. A new date for the start of the federal trial has not been set. Now, the United Nations says Israel is not allowing humanitarian aid and workers into Gaza through the Rafah crossing after its forces took control of the Gaza side of the border with Egypt. Hamas has warned that the Israeli incursion there aims to undermine efforts to secure a ceasefire. Last night, Hamas announced it had accepted proposals drawn up by international mediators, but the deal was rejected by Israel as far from meeting its core demands. Paul Adams has more from Jerusalem.
A deal may now be tantalizingly close, but in Rafah, Israel's military pressure is relentless. Today, severing Gaza's last link with the outside world, the crossing point into Egypt. And raising their flag, sending an unmistakable message to Hamas. The noose is tightening. The sounds of approaching war echo among the displaced. Hundreds of thousands of Palestinians living in the sand against the Egyptian border or next to the sea. I don't know where to stay, Ahmed says. People are fleeing from Rafah, and I have my children with me. Gazans have been on the move since yesterday morning, heeding Israel's latest warnings, not knowing if the coming days will bring relief or despair.
After what we've witnessed, they will be a ceasefire, but we're frustrated and we have no hope. There's no big hope, only a small one.
For aid agencies already struggling to cope, the prospect of a full-scale Israeli operation in Rafah is alarming.
As the operation will progress, we will lose progressively more areas to the fighting. And I'm afraid that this will also affect our warehouses, health facilities, hospitals, and the very, very few sites where we have the ability to give medical support.
For the families of Israeli hostages, these are also moments of acute anxiety. John and Rachel's son Hirsch was abducted and badly injured on October the 7th. No sign of life until this Hamas video 2 weeks ago. His parents now just daring to hope.
When we heard the news that maybe there's a deal, we were cautiously optimistic. And we remain cautiously optimistic.
It's scary to have military actions going on. There are innocent civilians, including our son. We just need this to come to an end, and we need the mediators on all sides and the two main parties to just sit in the room and hammer this out and don't come out of the room without a deal.
Away from the quiet dignity of the hostage families, friends and supporters are determined to make as much noise as possible, demanding the government do more to rescue Hirsch and all the others. These Israelis protesting in the heart of Jerusalem tonight feel that a deal to end this terrible war has never been closer. And so, as they protest close to the Prime Minister's official residence, their demands are becoming more and more urgent. Israel's defense minister says the Rafah operation won't stop until Hamas is eliminated or the hostages start to return. Talks are continuing, a successful outcome still far from guaranteed.
I spoke to Jean-Louis Saman, a senior research fellow at the Middle East Institute at the National University of Singapore. He gave his take on how close we are to this conflict coming to an end.
Well, I think on this topic, the cautious optimism is the right expression. Clearly, I think we see some elements that tend to say that both sides, Hamas and Israel, are still considering a ceasefire. At the same time, there is a lot of tension regarding the latest revised proposal that the Israeli government didn't accept. There's a lot of uncertainty on the condition of the hostages, which could actually lead Israel to consider the proposal is just irrelevant. So a lot could happen, but I don't think that we reached the point where a ceasefire is no longer relevant.
And what about Israel's actions in at the Rafah border, then the Egypt-Rafah border, where they now have control of the Gaza side of it? Is that going to have any sort of impact on the talks that are ongoing?
Clearly, I think it's actually a continuation of the negotiations by other means. I think the Israeli government is putting pressure, like it did in the past, on Hamas, and telling the Hamas leadership, if you do not accept our demands, we will go ahead with the operation. Having said that, the Israelis, as well as the Americans, have been very clear that what we've seen over the last days is not a full-scale operation. We didn't see a ground invasion of Rafah, but clearly what we saw is a lot of airstrikes, a lot of special forces entering Rafah. So this could be the beginning of a full-scale operation. So what I think will happen is, if we see the collapse of the hostage negotiations, probably the offensive on Rafah will happen.
A lot of military activity seems to be focused on there at the moment, not so much in the rest of the Gaza Strip. Do you get a sense that Israel feels like it might be approaching its endgame here?
Yes, I mean, if we remove the Rafah issue from the whole picture, most of the operations inside Gaza have been decreasing clearly over the last months. The Israeli forces on the ground have been reduced. We're talking about just 2 brigades. So this is, in the worst case scenario, this is going to be the last chapter of the military operation. This could be a devastating chapter, definitely at the humanitarian level, but clearly we're not at the same point as we were like 6 months ago, when the operation was just starting and the Israeli officials were talking about weeks and months of operation. Now, I think this is, no matter what happens, going to be the final chapter.
The Ukrainian Security Service says it's foiled a Russian plot to assassinate President Volodymyr Zelensky. 2 colonels have been detained, suspected of passing on secret information to Russia's security agency, the FSB. Our Ukraine correspondent, James Waterhouse, says Mr. Zelensky has not commented on the plot.
Well, there's been no mention by President Zelensky in his evening address about this latest attempt, or this plot against his life, which suggests how routine such attempts have become. But his intelligence service has been very keen to talk up these 2 arrests of 2 serving colonels in the country's security service, which is responsible for keeping officials safe. The allegations they face are lengthy, including being hired as moles by Russia's security service, the FSB, before the full-scale invasion, where there were meetings overseas, where there were large sums of money exchanged. It's alleged they tried to recruit some of President Zelensky and his top officials' security guards who might be willing to kidnap and kill them. It's alleged that they brought several weapons to Kyiv to carry out an attack, including anti-personnel mines, drones, explosives, and at the very least, this looks like quite the infiltration into President Zelensky's inner circle. But what the security service here are saying is that they've monitored it throughout and they got ahead of it. But this is a wartime leader, we must remind ourselves, who is willing to travel around the country and who faces very real risks on a daily basis. I don't think he'll be put off by this latest attempt, but it just shows the attempts that Russia allegedly is willing to carry out alongside what it's trying to do on the battlefield.
China's President Xi Jinping continues his European tour. After spending a day high up in the Pyrenees Mountains with French President Emmanuel Macron, Mr. Xi flew to Serbia for a visit coinciding with the 25th anniversary of the NATO bombing of China's embassy, in which 3 Chinese journalists were killed. In Belgrade, Mr. Xi is expected to discuss China's multi-billion-dollar investment in the country and possible new deals with his most important partner in the Balkans. Our correspondent, Guy Delaunay, was at the Nikola Tesla Airport.
This is the brand new China Cultural Center in Belgrade, but in 1999 it was the site of China's embassy in Serbia's capital, and 25 years ago to the day it was hit by a NATO airstrike, and there's a memorial over there to the 3 people who were killed. Now, NATO has always insisted that targeting the embassy was accidental, but ahead of his visit, President Xi Jinping has made it clear that feelings are still running high over the incident. He wrote an editorial for a Serbian newspaper in which he said that we will never forget. Chinese people cherish peace, but we will never allow such a thing to happen ever again. Now, that's the kind of rhetoric which goes down very well in Serbia, where the majority of people, the vast majority, are strongly opposed to NATO membership. And there are other reasons for people in Serbia to feel good about President Xi Jinping's arrival. China's been an increasingly active investor in Serbia in recent years, involved in everything from infrastructure like roads and railways through to domestic appliances like the Hisense factory. And it's an opportunity for Serbia to say to people in Brussels, with the EU accession process taking an interminably long time, look, we have other options, you know.
Around the world and across the UK, this is BBC News. You're live with BBC News. Now, Vladimir Putin attended a familiar ceremony today as he was sworn in for the 5th time as Russia's president. Mr. Putin has been in power since the turn of the century and is now beginning an unprecedented new 6-year term after winning 88% of the vote. At a lavish ceremony in the Kremlin, he was unapologetic about invading Ukraine, although he conceded that Russia was going through a difficult period. Our Russia editor Steve Rosenberg was there.
In Russia, times change.
Vladimir Vladimirovich Putin.
But the leader stays the same. The Russian Tsars, the gold, the grandeur of the Grand Kremlin Palace matched the image. Joseph Stalin. This is Vladimir Putin's 5th term in the Kremlin. The oath to serve the Russian people. And then the leader who'd invaded Ukraine accused the West of aggression.
We're not refusing to speak to Western nations. It's up to them whether they keep trying to hold Russia back and continue their aggression and years of pressure on our country, or seek a path to cooperation and peace.
Peace? Here, they're not expecting that anytime soon.
The West needs a weak Russia that will fall apart. Putin is standing in their way, so they try to weaken Russia by attacking Putin.
We're in the war, and the war is serious, and we're fighting. And
you could stop it tomorrow, though, by pulling your troops out of Ukraine, no?
Of course not. We will never stop, because we're fighting for our people.
It's incredible to think that in the nearly quarter of a century that Vladimir Putin has been in power in Russia, America has been through 5 different presidents. Britain has had 7 prime ministers. Mr. Putin's supporters welcome the continuity as they see it, despite the danger that comes from having one man in power for so long with so few checks and balances. Then, outside, more pomp for Putin and more imperial symbols.
Putin thinks of himself now as Vladimir the Great, as a Russian Tsar. Everything now in terms of the symbolism, the way that he refers to himself, this Russia now forged in war for the future, is taking us back to these past patterns in Russian and Soviet history.
But it's not just in the Kremlin where you'll find President Putin. 70 miles from Moscow, Big Vladimir is watching you. Western governments called Russia's election a sham. But in the town of Kashira, what do they think of the man who was declared the winner? I like him, says Valentina. Putin does a lot for people. Our pensions aren't big, but he can't fix everything in one go. He's had 25 years, I say. But we don't know who'd come next, she says. Perhaps that's because potential rivals are in exile or in jail, leaving one man running Russia. Steve Rosenberg, BBC News, Moscow.
Let's take a look at some other stories in the headlines. 90 people are now known to have died in floods that have devastated the Brazilian state of Rio Grande do Sul. And dozens of people are missing and more than 200,000 have been forced to leave their homes. In total, more than 1 million people in the metropolitan area haven't had access to clean water for days. A sixth victim's body has been found at the Baltimore bridge collapse site. A container ship struck the bridge on March the 26th, causing the 47-year-old structure to collapse into the Patapsco River. Officials continue to work to clear the wreckage to reopen routes to the busy port of Baltimore. A woman suspected of poisoning people with deadly mushrooms in Australia has pleaded not guilty to murder. Erin Patterson faces 3 counts of murder for allegedly dishing up a poisonous beef Wellington meal that killed her parents-in-law and another family member. Miss Patterson has always maintained her innocence. Also in the headlines, chaos at airports across the UK after a nationwide failure of passport e-gate systems. Passengers have been reporting long queues to get to passport control at airports including Manchester, Gatwick and Heathrow. The Home Office said it was working to resolve the issue. Now take a look at the situation on the ground as I chat to Laura Howes, stuck in the chaos at Stansted Airport in North London.
People actually broke through the barrier just here on my left to get through to passport control faster. They were then turned away again, but hundreds of people are inside this room right now. It's pretty wall-to-wall. There's not a huge amount of floor left, yet there are still more flights arriving. So it's just getting busier and busier, and we don't have any answers or any additional information as far as I'm aware of yet.
Laura, it seems like frustration is growing amongst the passengers there, and the lack of information must be playing a part in that. Has no one been able to tell you, how long you're going to be or what they're going to be doing to help the situation? Sorry, we've just seen you knocked your camera over, unfortunately. But we've still got you.
No, that's okay. Yeah, somebody else knocks it over, actually. It's so chaotic in here. Everybody's not really looking where they're going. People are just busy focusing on getting to the front. But the problem is nobody knows where they need to go. Nobody knows why there are so many delays. We know there's a nationwide issue, but we don't know what's causing it. We don't know how quickly it's going to be resolved. So people have realised they've missed the last Stansted Express home. People don't know when they're going to get to leave the airport, when they'll get to go to work, when they'll get to take their children home. So it's quite chaotic and quite distressing for a lot of people.
And Laura, are the airport services staff able to sort of alleviate any of the frustrations? Are they handing out water? Are they trying to take care of the people stuck in queues?
I've seen people handing out water to members of staff at the airport, but I haven't seen any passengers being handed water or being offered water yet. Children are being prioritised, but I would say that it's being more encouraged actually by the people in the queue rather than airport staff themselves. You can see people taking great sympathy on parents with babies in their arms fast asleep. So people are getting through the queue slightly faster if they have children, but there's no guarantee that when they do get to the front of the queue that they'll be going anywhere.
And Laura, just quickly, I'm not sure if you'll be able to answer this, but are flights still arriving into Stansted where you are? Presumably, if there's a bottleneck forming, it's only going to get worse as more flights arrive.
Yeah. Well, I can confirm that behind me, where the trains take passengers from their planes to passport control, there was a train that's just pulled in the last minute. So that's a sign to me that there are still flights arriving. My flight, for example, was delayed, so I don't know whether there's more delays, but I can certainly imagine that there might be more flights to come, given one has just arrived in the last minute.
And you can get the latest on what's been happening at the airports across the UK on our website, bbc.com/news. Now, moving on, Miss USA says she is relinquishing her title to prioritise her mental health. 24-year-old Noelia Voigt won the beauty pageant last year and represented the US at the Miss Universe competition in El Salvador in November. Emily Brown has more.
Noelia Voigt won the Miss USA beauty pageant last year. The 24-year-old's only worn the crown since September and says her decision to step down may come as a shock. This is one of the most prestigious pageant organisations in the world. The announcement came on Instagram. She said in a post, "Never compromise on your physical and mental well-being," and said in life she values the importance of making decisions that feel best for you and your mental health. In response, the Miss USA organisation said the well-being of our title holders is a top priority, and we understand her need to prioritise herself at this time. It's not the first time high-profile figures have stepped back from their roles to focus on their mental health. Jacinda Ardern resigned as New Zealand Prime Minister just last year, and four-time Olympic gold medal winner Simone Biles stepped back away from gymnastics for 2 years for a mental health break. She's now back competing. The Miss USA organisation added it started the process of transferring Voigt's responsibilities to a successor. But of course, the resignation has already raised many questions around the pressures within the pageant industry as a whole.
And that brings us to a close here on Newsday for this hour. Thanks as always for your company. And do stay with me because coming up on Business Today, we'll talk about TikTok. The social media platform filed a lawsuit aiming to block a US law that would ban the video sharing app in the country unless it's sold by its Chinese parent company. That and more business news are coming right up. In the meantime, thanks for your company and bye for now.
Hello. The weather has been gradually drying up over the past 24 hours or so, and we've got some more dry, settled weather on the cards through much of the week ahead, really. High pressure is going to be in charge over the next few days, but for the rest of the week, we will at times see weather fronts just trying to topple across the north of that high pressure. Could bring a little bit of rain at times across parts of Scotland, in particular, perhaps the north of Northern Ireland, but it'll be warming up here. Mostly dry elsewhere, though, with some spells of sunshine on the cards. So we are in for a relatively quiet few days of weather. We're likely to start Wednesday morning with quite a bit of mist and fog around, especially so for parts of eastern England, also perhaps Wales and the southwest of England. Could be some misty patches elsewhere. For most, they'll tend to lift and clear, so it'll brighten up. Some sunny spells, particularly for England and Wales. Just the odd isolated shower. More rain moving into the northwest of Scotland later on in the afternoon. So temperatures in the northwest under the cloud, only about 13 there for Stornoway, but up to around about 21 for the likes of Birmingham and London too. So there's that wet weather through Wednesday evening. Northern Ireland, northern and western Scotland seeing some outbreaks of rain. Further south, most places staying dry, but there should be some mist and some fog that's going to be forming again into the early hours of Thursday morning. But certainly mild, many places staying in double figures overnight. So more of the same on Thursday. High pressure still in charge, so a lot of dry weather, mist clearing away gradually. Lots of sunshine, I think, for England and Wales by this stage. It just could be the odd isolated shower. Again, a little bit more cloud across the north of Scotland. Temperatures in Lerwick only around 11 degrees, but for the bulk of the UK, we're looking at around about 18 to 22 degrees. And that warming trend will continue as we head into Friday too. So high pressure still very much in charge. I think by Friday we'll have less in the way of rain and cloud across the north of Scotland and quite widely across the UK in those spells of sunshine. Temperatures will be above 20 degrees. We could see 23 or even 24 down towards the southeast. Again, a little bit cooler, especially across the north of Scotland and the Northern Isles in particular. Now, heading into the weekend, it looks like high pressure will be setting out towards the east there. This weather front will just try and nudge in from the west by the time we get to Sunday. But Saturday certainly looking dry, fine, pretty warm for all of us. Just that chance of a few showers moving into the west as we head through Sunday. Bye for now.
I want Hip Life to be that good story that lifted Black folks in Africa and all over the world, gave young people a voice.
It's part of being an actor because I always say as an actor, you can't be a control freak. You have to be willing to give up control.
So I like this idea of a live piece of art. And I just like this idea of making invisible visible through art.
Sometimes you can have really serious portraits, but
You've got such a great laugh. I feel like I want to capture some of the candid nature of your personality.
Opera House can and must be many things. It shouldn't cater just to one audience, and it shouldn't be focused on just one corner of the repertoire. It must do everything and be open to the interests of many different people.
Inspiring arts and culture. Watch now on iPlayer.